And what was it like starting your business?
Absolutely nerve-wracking. You're just trying to put every single moment into social media, so just trying to put as much into LinkedIn, and I have to say LinkedIn is probably one of the key places that helped me build my clients. But getting over the fear of posting.
Does that then become a burden?
It does become a wee bit laboursome because property is a thing that people always want to talk about. From one post I would have maybe been getting about 80 to 100 comments.
And how many projects did you say having to go at one time?
Anything from 7 to 10.
That's a fair workload.
It was, but I really enjoyed it. Make sure you get a home buyer's report. Don't ever buy a property without a home buyer's report. I have seen clients where they haven't, and they're like, no, the mortgage report's good enough, and he ended up having to replace every timber on the inside of a house. Everything had to go in the entire house. Make sure you've got multiple exit strategies. Don't go and just buy something. You can't always be guaranteed the outcome. You just really need to make sure that you do your due diligence, especially in Northern Ireland, because
welcome to the Property Funding Podcast, the podcast where property developers learn tips and lessons that help them save time and save money. So delighted today to be joined by Laura Cairns. Laura is the founder and director of Cairns Downing and also NI Property Investments Limited.
yes, great to be here.
So fantastic to have you on. Thank you for joining us on our wonderful podcast.
Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. So we actually first met back in, I think, about 2009. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's probably about right. Yeah, back in the early days, whenever I was managing some rentals for yourself.
I thought you were going to say both of them were young, but of course you're still young.
I wish.
I've aged a bit, but you haven't changed a bit. But you were at that stage. I had the buy-let portfolio. That was just after the credit crunch, actually, wasn't it? So 2009, or was it just the back end of it?
It was the back end of it, yeah. I just graduated from uni and started out as a letting agent in Lurgan.
Okay.
And then that's how we met.
Yeah, so that was Dermot and Gavin. They started QuickLet.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, I remember they were starting up just this wee office in Lurgan, as sort of new kids in the block.
That's it.
So we thought, you know what, we'll give them a go. And I can't remember if they contacted us or we contacted them. I can't remember, but
it was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. I remember getting in and you were there in the office. I can remember that. So you were our sort of first, as you say, sort of letting manager. Yeah. I think we had 3 properties nearby then that we handed over to you to let. So
I think that's right. Yeah.
We still have those 3 from way back in about 2004, possibly.
Very good.
So we still have them. So. Yeah, long and still with QuickLet as well, believe it or not. So
very good.
There we are. So what we do, Laura, is we start off with a bit of a quick fire round.
Okay.
Okay, not put you in the spot here and totally non-pre-warned, but this is the fun part. It just kind of breaks the ice a little bit and gets our listeners to know a bit more about you and understand about you a bit more. All right. So one word answers. Okay.
I'll do my best.
No pausing and waiting and thinking. Just straight in there. So, favorite food.
Mushrooms.
Favorite film?
What Happened in Vegas.
Oh, very good. Who starred in that?
I'm rubbish for names. Ashton Kutcher.
Oh,
and,
yes. That's right.
Blonde-haired girl.
I know who you mean. Yes, no. Now that you mentioned that, I remember it now. Right. Favorite country?
France.
Okay. Favorite sport?
I don't do sport.
Don't do sport. There we are. Looking after 3 kids. That's the sport. Okay, so can't ask you what team you support if you don't do sport. Well, any teams you follow?
Well, the husband and the kids support Arsenal, so
Arsenal.
I just tag along.
So he's happy enough at the minute then?
Yeah.
Pretty happy?
To the demise of my family, because they're all avid United supporters, so...
Oh, that would make for interesting Christmas.
It does,
I could imagine. Well, I think Arsenal's finishing above United in the league this year, so...
They are.
Hubby will be happy. Apple or Android?
Android. All the way.
I'm liking you even better now. You know, when you're in London doing these, usually it's by and large Apple, so I'm glad to be back in Android country.
I've never had an Apple.
Ever?
I've had a MacBook,
right.
But I've never had an Apple phone.
Okay. And was that just because you were comfortable with Android, or was there any particular reason around Apple?
I think from always having an Android and then seeing people with their Apples, I've never really enjoyed using an Apple whenever I've tried using anybody else's phone.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. I'm definitely an Android person. Okay, dream car?
Port.
Okay. And this is the big one. This is the big dividing one. Marmite, like it or hate it?
Hate it.
Oh, you're in the majority, I think, on that. So, favorite type of property? Is it apartments? Is it villas? Is it terraced housing?
Probably HMO.
HMO. Okay, very good, very good.
Love them.
And if you could own a property in one location, anywhere in the world, where would it be?
South France.
South of France. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming a big villa somewhere. Is it something like that, or?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the
Okay.
goal in the pipeline.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay. So you'll be glad to know the end of the quick fire round.
Good.
It was just to get a bit more about you. So, tell us a bit about your early life, growing up, and particularly any influences that had on you, maybe parents, relatives, or people you met in your journey.
Okay, so early life, I one of four. Grew up in the 80s. So my dad worked away from home most of the time, so mum basically looked after us. And then, went to school, left school at 17 after doing my A-levels. Was always really interested in building things, so was real tomboy.
Right, okay.
Loads of Lego.
I wouldn't have had that.
Really?
And thinking, no.
Yeah,
So,
I was always a real tomboy.
Right, okay.
Loved climbing trees, building Lego, playing with mechanics. Don't know if you remember mechanics
oh, we've met
back in the
definitely.
day.
Yeah.
That's what I spent my time doing as
Right.
a child. Very nerdy. But so it actually comes back to a really good story. Whenever I left school, I hadn't a clue what I wanted to do. We were kind of channeled down the route of, because I was very good at maths, physics, computers and things. That's what I've done for my A-levels. You're channeled into going into something in that line. So I went to Manchester first of all,
Okay.
to uni, studied manufacturing systems engineering, and it was just like, didn't like it.
Right.
Then the next year I went to Liverpool, studied there for a year and done computers again.
Right.
Didn't like
Okay.
it.
Okay.
So I ended up coming home, and then I had my first daughter at the very young age of 20. So I ended up
Right.
a single parent in a council house,
Right.
came in benefits, had no idea what I was going to do with my life.
Right. I didn't know that part of your
Yeah,
background. Okay.
yeah.
So 20, single parent, having sort of two different courses, didn't quite work out,
Yeah,
and you're literally going, where do I go from here?
where do I go from here?
So how did that evolve then? How did you end up sort of on the path you're on now?
So we seen a job advertisement for a temporary post in housing executive.
Okay.
So I went and I got it, and within 3 months I was promoted twice. So I just really loved the whole property work. It started, so then I kind of done a bit of research, found a course in Jordanstown
Okay.
in University of Ulster, doing property investment and development. So I applied for it, I got in, and then worked 2 jobs to try and keep us afloat while we were at uni. So went to uni 3 days, worked the other 3,
Wow.
and then done all my studying after Kate went to bed at 7:30. So
That's
I got my degree.
you have to have a passion at what you're doing to go through that sort of journey of the traveling, looking after a youngster, working, studying.
To be fair, now it was actually easier going to uni than what it was working or looking after a child.
Right.
So
Okay.
we were
Okay.
getting to go there and hang out. But
Yes. That's it. Yeah.
I was working in a delicatessens in Portadown at the time. I'm a primary school teacher. She came in
Okay.
to me because I was obviously a late student at this stage. I was
Yes.
older. She came in and she goes, Laura, isn't it? And I was like, yeah. She's like, what are you doing working here? And I remembered her straight away. She taught me from P1 to P3. And she's like, what are you doing working here? I thought you'd have been away building houses. And I was like, I was in my
Right.
final year in study in Jordanstown. And I was going, how did she remember? She was like, you just used to sit and build houses all the
Is that
time
right?
whenever you were young. Yeah.
Wow. That is interesting, actually.
I know, isn't
So
it?
that was the calling.
That was the calling.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
how I got into property. And then, of course, I graduated in the bust. So
Yeah.
we came out. We went to, by this stage, I had met my now husband.
Okay.
So we decided to go to Australia for 6 weeks.
Okay.
So we went road tripping around Australia, the 3 of us.
That's an experience.
That was an experience. And I came home then and I got the job in Quicklet.
Well, okay, so that's right at that time. Okay, very
Yeah.
good. No, that's definitely interesting in terms of your, those that came in contact with you when you're younger, seeing your passion for property and things like that. I'm laughing because one of the earliest photographs I have, you mentioned Australia.
Yeah.
So I lived in Papua New Guinea
Okay.
for 5 years,
Right.
just north of Australia. Mum and Dad were missionaries. There's a photograph of me. It would have been taken in the old 35mm, cameras as they were in those days, and converted into slides. But there's one of me being homeschooled, and I've drawn this picture of a house, chalk on a chalkboard, and I'd always laugh and say, there you are. I put that in a few presentations. Even as a 6-year-old, I was drawing houses and stuff. So I don't know if that's
isn't it how it works out? Yeah.
But that's interesting. So you end up then, you come back and you start QuickLet. You mentioned about promotions in your first job.
Yeah.
I know within QuickLet you went from letting manager to, I think, office manager, and then I remember you then became senior manager over a couple of branches. So
so by the time
and that all happened quite quickly, if I remember.
Yeah, it did. I was there for 9 years altogether. But started off as letting agent, and then as the team grew, I became office manager, or branch manager, and then as we got new offices, then I became the senior manager then. So it worked out really well, I have to say, and the boys were great to work for.
Yeah, I see them the very odd time.
Yeah.
But certainly they started that business 2009, and they've done very well. And they've provided a good service. I can remember back, and we actually, myself and my wife, had ran a management letting agent in Moira.
Right. Okay.
Back in 2002.
Oh, really?
For a couple of years.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty familiar with that game. I think by 2009 we probably bought and sold about 100 buy-to-lets in Northern Ireland, Scotland.
Very good.
So we're pretty familiar with the letting world. But when the market was really good, service wasn't great.
Yeah.
And probably the same in most industries. But I can remember just thinking, we're not getting a good service here with different letting agents, and then Gavin and Dermot, and genuinely, I'm not just saying that because you're here, genuinely there was a good service, and in the early days they were on the phone themselves, checking up on things, making sure things had went okay, making sure we're happy, and I remember sort of thinking, okay, these guys are doing it right.
Yeah.
And no doubt you help influence that.
There was a lot of good systems in place within the business to make sure that everybody followed through in the job, to make sure that there was never really anything missed.
Yeah,
and I think that was really important to keeping the levels of service up.
Yeah, especially if you open new branches.
Yeah.
Then it becomes a whole different, game when it comes to processes, because everyone's not in one office to deal with the issues. All of a sudden you've got remote workers. So what took you out of that then? So you go 2009. You said about 9 years. You said you were there.
I was there 9 years.
So you're there. You're established. You've sort of got promoted. What was the itch, if you like, to go out then on your own?
I suppose I had baby number 3,
Okay.
and then I'd married my husband, and he had a daughter as well. So at times we had 4 kids, which is a handful on its own. So do you know what? When looking back on it, I go, was I mental? Because I left a really good job that I loved. But I suppose the pressure of having my youngest, he was always sick and he was always in hospital, and I think there was more stress in trying to get work covered because I was never, he was in and out of hospital quite a bit, just with random stuff throughout his first year of life.
Okay.
So I kind of just thought, do you know what? I really feel like I want to go and do something for myself at this point. So that's whenever I started NI Property Investments.
Okay, and just describe what that was. What were you trying to achieve with that, or what problem were you trying to solve with that?
So whenever I was working in QuickLet, there was always clients that would have came to me and said, or came to staff and said, do you know of any houses that were looking to buy more? So I kind of just thought maybe there's a bit of a gap in the market for somebody actually sourcing properties for investors who just don't have the time to do it themselves. So I started doing property sourcing, if you like, and that's what NI Property Investments was or is. So I source investments for investors who either don't know what they're doing or don't have the time to do it, but they've got the money to do it and they want their money to work for them, really. Okay,
so you've decided then to move out on your own then in that. So how big a decision was that, if you don't mind me going here, even within the family with hubby? Because I know myself and my wife have always had this over the years where I say I've got a self-employed mentality, and I think Brenda's got what I call an employed mentality. So it's getting that working for the family. Was there any big discussions around that, or do you just kind of go, you know what, let's try it?
I think whenever I get an idea into my head, it's kind of, that's it. I just kind of go for it. I don't kind of go, well, what if? I'm kind of going, well, I know I'll make it work.
Right, okay.
So, I kind of go jump in first and figure it out later.
Okay.
So, and Jeff, bless him, of course, yes, we had discussions and everything about it, but he's so supportive and has always been really good support in the background. And so he kind of maintained his. He was actually employed at the time, and he kept that job going until I was up on my feet.
Okay.
And then of course COVID hit, so that was
Yes,
great
that's right.
crack.
Yeah. So 2009, 9 years.
So 18.
So right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it was about a year and a half in, and COVID hit.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And were there any at that point? I know since then, education. You're meeting people. You're now kind of what I call on the circuit, in a sense that you're around the events and people want you to come and speak at their events, and you're popular like that. Was there anyone that was like a mentor to you in the early days that maybe you would go and listen to, or maybe attended events? Did you do any education up to that point, or was it just sort of something inside you?
I actually had Paul McFadden as a
okay.
mentor.
Yes. Okay.
For about a year and a half.
Okay.
So I did maybe 2 years. So I would have been back and forth to Glasgow with Paul, and then obviously there's quite a group then of ones that we would have done stuff together as well.
Yes. Okay. And that was before you made the decision to go out on your own, or was that after?
That was after.
After, okay.
Yeah.
So that kind of maybe gave you something to people you could talk to and go through. And what was it like starting your business? So where you're originally, you go in, you do your week's work, and you go home, and obviously the paycheck's coming.
Yeah.
What was it like early doors? Kind of, there's no one telling you what you have to do.
Nerve-wracking.
But you've got the bills to pay.
Yeah, absolutely nerve-wracking. And I suppose you're just trying to put every single moment into social media, and at that point I was all over LinkedIn. So just trying to put as much into LinkedIn, and I have to say LinkedIn is probably one of the key places that helped me build my clients list up, and it really worked.
Do you use other social media as well at that point, or was LinkedIn kind of your focus?
Yeah, I had my websites up and running, and all my social medias up and running, which I did post on a daily basis or every other day. But getting over the fear of posting at the start, was a big thing, and I think, maybe that's where Paul came in. He really helped overcome that fear, I suppose. I worked as much as I could on LinkedIn, and got a really good traction on LinkedIn. So, yeah.
How many sort of followers did you build up with just LinkedIn contacts? I mean, if you put an average post up, what sort of views were you getting on LinkedIn?
At that point, I think I was getting maybe anywhere up to, I think the highest was about 25,000 hits.
So 25,000 hits on a post LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That's impressive. And how long after you started your LinkedIn profile were you getting that sort of 20,000 plus eyeballs?
Remember, trying to think back, I think maybe about 6 or 7 months in.
Okay, that's
so
very
that
good.
was building contacts.
That's very good.
I think it was a bit easier back then too, because on LinkedIn you could request a whole lot more.
That's a good point.
People that I think LinkedIn, it's brilliant, but right now they think that you don't know any more than 50 people.
Yeah,
and in a business society, obviously you know a whole lot more than 50 people, and you can't go in and just kind of connect with people straight away anymore, whereas you used to be able to. So I kind of felt lucky on that sense of things.
The timing was good for you at that point.
Yeah.
Now, I know we've talked about this before. The success on social media, the success on LinkedIn, you're putting up a post, you're becoming quite well known on again the circuit. You're in demand as a public speaker. You're in demand as a trainer. Now you're high profile on LinkedIn. 20,000 people every time you post. Does that then become a burden or a challenge, or is it just the more the merrier?
No, it does become a wee bit laboursome, because property is a thing that people always want to talk about, as I'm sure you know.
Yes.
So from one post I would have maybe been getting about 80 to 100 messages in saying,
questions.
Yeah, comments, can I pick your brain about this? Or, I'm looking at this project, would you mind having a wee look at it and see if you think it's worthwhile? And as much as you'd love to get back to everybody, it's physically impossible to do. So,
and how often were you posting roughly in those days?
In those days, at the very start I was trying to post nearly every day, and then I kind of whittled it down to maybe 3 to 5 posts a week.
Still three posts a week at 80 comments or questions, like that's...
The inbox was just flooded constantly, and I mean, whenever it first started, it was like, oh, this is brilliant, this is great. But then towards the end, it was like, I I really can't. Because a lot of them were turning into, you know, client Zoom calls and people who were actually saying that they wanted to come on board, but it was trying to sort out the ones who just weren't tire kickers, as you like.
Yeah. Which there are plenty of those about,
there are.
as we know. No, that's interesting. I mean, it's a nice problem to have.
It is. It's a
I
great
mean,
problem
most
to have.
people looking at their business would just dream of having that type of traction. It's interesting that you got that traction, you got the interest, and then had to, for your own business processes. Did you not think of maybe hiring someone to look after all those questions, or do you just feel that if I'm not doing it, it doesn't make sense, therefore? I'm assuming then that you then sort of cut back then on what you did on LinkedIn. Is that how you addressed the problem?
I did. I did actually have somebody. I
Okay.
did hire somebody, and they were trying to sort out then who was, you know, worthwhile in getting back to, and who was actually made it through to getting a Zoom and that. But then COVID hit, and we couldn't really do a whole lot. We were shut down, and we were only allowed to do projects that we were currently working on in empty buildings, but everything just slowed dramatically because
of course.
if the plasters were in 1 week, we had to wait a certain amount of time before we could send the painters in, and then there was no two trades allowed on the premises at one time. So everything slowed down. And
so your service then with you know, the NI Property Investments, not only did you source the properties, did you then provide the service to renovate and decor the properties? You did all of that service as well?
We did all of that service. Even if we were doing HMOs for clients, we would put the planning applications in and go right through to the license agreements and things like that.
And how many projects did you say having to go at one time?
At that point, maybe anything from 7 to 10.
That's a fair workload.
It was, but I really enjoyed it.
Right.
You know, I could work around my own schedule. You know, I worked during the day when the kids were at school or in crash, and then spent my time with them whenever they got home and put them to bed. And then if I needed to go back out in the evening to work, I'd have went back out in the evening to work.
And were you absolutely sacrosanct in that school to bedtime? I mean, was that like just there's no one's getting that time, that's my family time?
That's my family time. That's why I left my job, my employed job, was to have the time with my family. So I think, you know, they came first, obviously. And I suppose that time off that we had in lockdown was just, it was brilliant.
It was. No, I agree. I think with so many families, I think almost like relationships improved. Probably after the initial working out, you can't all be in the kitchen at the same time and all of that. But I think relationships improved because you were just with people and you got to see them more often than you did before. And then you're, you know, playing games and watching films together. And so I agree. I think it was an interesting dynamic for society and family. So you found that in some ways you almost enjoyed having the family at home all the time?
Yeah, well, our family, my oldest daughter had just moved to Belfast, so she was kind of stuck there, so we weren't able to see her.
Oh, right, okay.
And then we weren't able to see my husband's daughter either because two households weren't allowed to mix.
So that would have been tough.
That was tough.
Yeah.
But the youngest kids, Noah and Charlotte, were only 2 and 5, so they just had so much quality time with both parents at home for 6 whole weeks. All day, every day. It was great, and the weather was brilliant. So
yes, that's right. It was a good summer. Yeah, I remember
it was,
that. Unfortunately, we were at the back of going to the lagoon, so we were able to hop over the fence and walk along the lagoon.
Yeah.
So that was nice for us. Like we were fortunate with the dog and stuff. So, okay. So your property investments, NI property investments, and then you decide, you know what, I've got too much spare time. I need to launch another business.
No,
that wasn't a thought process, but
no, it wasn't a thought process. So obviously, always being from an estate agency, letting agents background, my clients started asking me, Laura, would you not just manage this for me? Would you not sell this for me? So we would have recommended out estate agents for selling properties, and I maybe shouldn't be saying this, but we've been through a few. And the clients were saying, like, this really isn't a great service.
Okay, yes.
So can you not just sell this for me? Because I didn't have an estate agent at the time.
Yeah.
So me and a business partner that I have from another business where we do our own projects together, we decided, well, why not open up an estate agents? So we opened up the estate agency. We automatically had a massive portfolio of rental properties to start managing.
From your clients?
From my clients,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, within a few months we had a member of staff on board. We were due to launch on March 2020. Obviously that didn't happen.
Okay.
Lockdown.
Yeah.
So we launched online in May 2020.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. And how, I'm always intrigued, because this is one of the challenges I've had, when we had Leo crowdfunding and we're trying to employ staff and making that big decision about, do you maximize the resources you have now and grow steadily, or do you raise more capital? Do you hire a bunch more staff that gives you then the capability of doing more? How did you approach that within your new business? You're sitting down around a table. What was the journey like to decide on much money needed to go in and how fast you wanted to grow?
I think because we had the security of a management portfolio.
Yes. Okay.
We kind of just took the decision, right? Okay, as long as we're breaking even here, we're good as the directors, because we have our own other businesses that could keep us going. So we didn't really want to borrow any capital for the business.
Okay.
So the business has kind of just grew on turnover, and the turnovers just grew exponentially in the last 2 years. We opened a branch in Dromore a year and a half ago, and yeah, there's now 4 of us working in there. So it's really good. It's growing massively, more than what we thought it would. So we're actually hiring again at the minute. So
okay, yeah, so
it's exciting times.
Full on. So
full on.
In terms of our listeners, I know a lot of them are always curious to sort of see, how do professional people like divide their work-life balance, but also what processes do they use, what tools do they use? So you're obviously a mother, a wife, 3 kids, plus I think you have a stepdaughter.
Yeah.
So that's another whole sort of interesting sort of journey and factor. So you've got a full home life, if I put it that way, with responsibilities and commitments and time. You've then got one business. You then launch another business. I know you've done some of your own developments as well on top of that. So how does Laura plan the week? How does Laura make sure that the right time is spent on the right things, and what tools do you use to aid that process?
Okay, so I have certain days assigned to Cairns Downing, and certain days then assigned to NI Property Investments.
Right, okay.
So NI Property Investments, I have a VA that does a lot of the admin work in there. So she kind of whittles down all of the kind of, the mundane tasks, if you like, does all of that for me. So the only things that I'm really doing in there at the minute is the off-market viewings. I have kept my client base, so I'm not taking on any new clients in there at the moment.
Okay.
Just really sourcing properties for that specific client base, and project managing those. My husband, who has a maintenance business, he does a lot of my refurbs. So it makes life a bit easier because we can chat about that in the evening.
Do you ever haggle over invoices? You're charging too much for that, but the price of materials gone up.
All the time.
I can imagine.
That'll
make an interesting dinner table conversation. Invoice 25, take 5% off.
So that's what he does. So he does a lot of.
But that's handy though, being able to have that sort of in house, if you like.
Yeah.
Good, okay. No, but brilliant on that. And then in terms of productivity, like, is your diary electronic? Is it written? How do you task list? How do you do that?
I have a diary that I write everything in. So it's an A4 page. There's a page for each day of the year. In the property management and sales in Cairns Downing, we have property software that manages the whole ins and outs of everybody's diaries within that company. And then the VA for NI Property Investments, we have a whole Outlook Teams section for that. But sometimes I find it difficult to navigate between the 2 different diaries, so everything goes in my written one. And then that's just easier for me to process.
That's interesting,
yeah.
So then do you start in the morning with a cup of tea or coffee and write it all out, or do you do it the night before, or?
No, usually as an appointment's booked in, I'll write it in the diary.
As you go along?
As I go along,
okay.
and then I'll know what I have. So even, if I have a appointment with my VA, and we're going through stuff, then, I'll say, right, okay, so next week we're going to check up on X, Y, and Z, and I'll write that in the diary for next week.
So it's all in there?
So it's all in there.
Okay.
I just find that works easier for me.
Yeah.
I'm dyslexic, so
right, okay.
kind of navigating things sometimes is a wee bit more.
Yeah, so if you write it out, then you're happy that you have it.
Yeah.
Just don't lose the diary.
Yeah.
That's
just
it.
don't lose the diary. No, it's with me.
Put a tracker on it or something. That would be like, oh no.
It goes with me everywhere.
Everywhere.
So it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting because a lot of people now are like, especially when in London and places like, so many people are just so everything's electronic. Diaries, bookings, tasks, everything are just like electronic. Just a phone. That's it. Yeah. Whereas I tend to be, I like writing things out.
I like writing things down.
I think we've maybe lost a bit of that skill.
Age.
That could be it, Laura. That could be it. You may cut that bit taller. I'm talking about age. But I just like the feel of actually sitting down almost and emptying my brain.
Yeah.
I don't feel I'm doing the same one when I'm writing on a phone.
Yeah, that's it.
I just love blank bit of paper. You're writing out, okay, what do you need to do tomorrow? And just having that 15-20 minutes at night before going to bed and going all the tasks. Dump your brain a bit of paper. I find I sleep better when I do that.
Yeah.
Just literally dump everything out of your brain on a bit of paper.
Especially
and then you're
on
ready
a Sunday.
To go. You get a chance to relax a wee bit and
Saturday and
plan
Sunday,
out.
if you're not doing anything, or totally family things, and then Sunday night, you kind of get a bit anxious. Oh, what's the week ahead? So
what's tomorrow morning?
What's tomorrow morning? Yeah, because it's funded out of your head over the weekend. Whereas at least it's all down on paper. You can just see it rather than.
Okay. So in terms then, say you're. I know you're an incredibly hard worker. I've known that all the time. I've known you. The amount of hours you put in. Are you driven in terms of big goals? Because there can be a difference. People can work hard, but are you driven? So like, do you start a quarter and go, right, here's my numbers for this quarter. Team, here's a number, and really drive towards that, or is it more that is your? Yeah. So how do you set that? What's your process for setting that?
Cairns Downing. So Janet, my business partner in Cairns Downing, so we sit down every year at the start of the year. We do our yearly projections, and then we meet every month at the start of the month and analyse the month before, look at the month, the next
see where you are,
month to come, see where we're going, what we need to do to rectify it, and that's how we plan Cairns Downing. With NI property investments, I'm a wee bit more lax with that. I'm more focused on providing the best service to the clients and making sure that they have the properties that they want and that their projects are being turned around within a timely manner. So, but I think the fact that they keep coming back shows that it's working out okay.
They're obviously getting a good service, so they're happy to pay for and experience. Okay, so pivoting slightly. So we are the Property Funding Podcast. This is what I've been doing for the last probably 7-8 years now. Really focusing on helping property developers, landlords, people with property projects and trying to source them, particularly equity, but now debt. So Northern Ireland, a market that we both know very well. Talk to me about the funding options in Northern Ireland.
As in no funding?
that's about right, isn't it?
It is. There's very limited funding. Even in your own personal name, to get a mortgage for a HMO, you're stuck to 1 or 2 mortgage providers. So it is very limited. And then if you go into a limited company, there's even fewer. So it's just about really trying to work with what we have and making sure, I suppose, that we have multiple different exit strategies, because the funding doesn't always happen in Northern Ireland.
That's a good point.
And just making sure that, I suppose, if we don't get the funding, where do we go next is a massive step. A lot of the funding that we use is private funding. Okay,
so that's how you... Was that primarily because accessing, call it mainstream institutional lending, was just so difficult that it forced you down that route? Okay.
It is very difficult and it's very expensive here, especially compared to mainland UK.
So if we go back just slightly and unpick that, why do you think that there is so few lenders offer debt over here in Northern Ireland?
I suppose in terms of the size of the market that there is here compared to what there is in England. We're such a small comparison, so And
yeah, why change
would
your
they?
systems and your okay.
Yeah.
Is there still, do you detect any sort of still caution around the troubles and what people thought that the province was like, and therefore there probably was a time they just not going to go there because we don't know what's going on over there.
I think
Has that changed, do you
I
think?
think it is changing. I think it's changing, but it's very slowly changing.
Yeah.
There are more people, there are more lenders coming into the market at a very slow rate.
Yeah.
So.
And then is it still a case where they're charging more for Northern Ireland?
A lot more.
Which again I find so frustrating. We have that even like for car insurance and all that sort of stuff. But I know it's the same for lending. In your experience, same for lending. If you had a project, say in Liverpool, Manchester, or wherever, you'd be offered one set of terms and rates and charges, and then your experience is that if you do the same thing here in Northern Ireland, it's just higher.
It's higher. It's a lot higher. And even from the banks, the Northern Irish banks, lending is a lot higher, and the loan to value rate is a lot lower as well. So, yeah.
That's like a double whammy if you're trying to do property.
Yeah.
So your niche then is you've sort of looked at that and went very, very few options for debt lending in Northern Ireland compared to I mean, even for the south, there's a lot more options, and obviously England, Scotland, and Wales. So we have just this wee nuance in Northern Ireland at the minute. So you then decided, you know what, I need to find solutions. Therefore, we're going to engage with private investors. So how did you go about doing that? How did you engage with those people that potentially had the money? What was the pitch to them?
I think building up my kind of reputation, done a lot, and my early LinkedIn days, done a lot for that, because I was always on there, always showing what I was doing for my clients.
Okay.
So whenever I came to drawing in funds that I could use myself, people were, they'd seen what I was able to do, so they were happy to lend in. You
built sort of credibility in the market,
yeah.
And then deep diving then, Laura, into say a case study. Okay, so I know you've done loads of different properties all over the north here, but pick one where you can just give us an idea of like what was the GDV of the project, say whenever you maybe finished the refurb, what was it bought for, what was the refurb cost, and how then did you structure the finance for that project?
Okay, so I completed one for a client this a couple of years ago now, but it was a block of 3 apartments. So it was an old Victorian mid-terrace property that had already been converted into apartments, totally run down, needed a full refurb. The purchase price was 150,000. The refurb was actually only, I think if I remember right, around 23,000.
Okay.
And the end value of the property, of the rents achieved, was 350,000.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's 150 purchase, 23. Is that 150 include cost as well, or was that 150
no,
and then so a few closing costs top of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So certainly the whole thing was well under 200,000.
It was, yeah.
And it valued then at 350.
350, yeah.
Okay, that was a good one. Any more of those about? No? If you find those, let me know, please. Okay, excellent. So you needed then to find 150,000 plus closing costs plus the refurb. So how do you then go about finding the money for that or sourcing the funds?
So to find the funds in Northern Ireland for a project that small initially wasn't that easy at the time, but the client had a SAS. So he was able to use his SAS to lend it to his limited company and then purchase through that.
Very good. And so all the funds he needed basically came from the SAS?
Yeah.
That's a win-win.
It is a win-win.
That's a win-win. Yeah, I've done a little bit of SAS work, and it's actually something I've been actually exploring more and more.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realise you can actually deploy SASs as equity.
They are very useful too.
Very, very good, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a thing called a genuinely diverse commercial vehicle, which is like a very niche sort of SaaS model, and you actually can get involved in residential property.
Yeah.
Now there's a few obviously caveats with that, but it's a brilliant market on that. So that's interesting. So yeah, 150 was that Belfast or somewhere else?
That was Belfast, yeah.
So 150 purchase price plus closing costs, 23 refurb, worth 350.
Yeah. I think it was the rents achieved then that made it
Yeah, so was
worth
that valued
so much.
commercially
It
then?
was a commercial valuation.
Commercial valuation.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's a good example of what you do for clients.
Yeah.
And no doubt you had a happy client
Very happy
after
client.
that. And you then do you take just straight fees, or do you ever take like a percentage of increased value or anything like that? How do you structure your
So
fees?
it really depends on each project. So each project is base specific. So
Okay.
if I'm just sourcing a standard buy to let or a flip, then it will have a standard fee. A HMO then would be fee structured differently, as would any commercials. Actually, with another client, so sometimes I would do like a joint venture where they put in the funds, and because there's such a margin, then we decide that we'll split the difference then for the profit.
Okay.
So one example was we purchased a property for 90,000. We spent 30 on the refurb.
Okay.
And so this one actually was financed with the SAS as well. But the property sold then for 185,000.
Okay.
So it was
Im-
nice.
Immediately after, basically after you finished the.
Yeah. So
Okay.
from we purchased it till it was sold 6 months later, then that was the profit.
Very nice. And
Yeah.
on that one, then you split that with the client.
I
is what you're
split that
saying?
one with the client, yeah.
Okay, very good. So that leads to some good chunky incomes for
Does.
projects that do well, but it's also performance based in the sense that if a project doesn't go well, because I'm assuming you have helped the client initially analyze and review the project to see is it even viable.
Yeah.
So that's part
sourced
of your
the property.
process. So you've sourced
I
it.
sourced
so
it,
you,
yeah.
So you know it makes sense as far as you're concerned.
Yeah.
You bring it to the client. You're then putting your credibility on the line to assent with the client and saying, look, this works.
Yeah.
Here's the numbers. And then if you deliver it, you're saying, I'm so confident it's going to work. I want to share the profit.
Yeah.
Okay, no,
I think the client would have been happy with that much profit if that was the only profit that there was to be made.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah. So anything
so
over above that is okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. And how much time, or do you have a system? Again, this is interesting for our listeners. When in your sourcing hat, what is your system for analyzing a property? Is it do you do it like on a spreadsheet? Do you have like a checklist online that you do? How do you decide, oh, there's a property, I wonder, does it work? What is that
So
analysis?
I have like a spreadsheet that I've made out on a calculator basis.
Yep.
And just put the figures into that, and if the outcome is what we want it to be, then we'll go for it.
Okay, yeah. So you
so
have a formula
with a
based spreadsheet
Yeah.
that either says yes or no effectively.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've obviously, I'm assuming, walked away from projects sometimes because it just didn't quite work. But
Plenty.
Do you farm them out to anybody else, or you just say that's not for me, I'm focusing on what I do?
Sometimes we will, there's a few property sources now in Northern Ireland, so we would kind of share leads, so if
Okay.
I have a client that mightn't want that project, somebody else might have one that does want it, because not every project is everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
So we'll pass leads on and then just do a fee return on it that way.
Yeah. Okay. So we like to keep it real.
Okay.
So we've all had our projects that didn't go quite to plan. I'm sure you've had a couple of those as well. Can you give me any ideas of anything that went like horribly wrong with the project, that you kind of thought, right, I didn't see that coming, or a problem that even just arrived outside your control,
Yeah.
but caused a problem with the
I think
project?
one of the main ones was myself and Janet bought a property in Belfast, and we're like, this is perfect HMO. We'll go in, we'll do all the work, and we did, and it was our first HMO, so we're kind of going, if we don't make any profit out of this, as long as we learn every lesson that there is to be learned, we will do well out of this project.
Yeah.
Well, I think we learned every single lesson that there is to be learned from
Okay.
that project.
Very good.
So I'll not disclose any figures on this because it's not just mine.
Yeah, that's fair.
But we went in and we did a great job on the refurb. The rooms rented like hotcakes at more than we thought that they would.
Okay.
And then we went to remortgage it.
Okay.
And BM said no.
Okay.
Just a wee tick box went no, and we were like, why?
Why?
And they were like, there's a cafe next door.
Right.
So we were kind of going, but it's not a chippy, it's only a cafe.
Uh-huh.
Why are you turning it down? And it was like, surveyor says no, tick box, that was it.
No conversation.
No conversation,
done.
that was it. And they were the only lender in the market.
That's a great example to let people understand how difficult it can be in Northern Ireland in terms of lenders.
So, but we had a really, really good turnover from this project. So we were like, right, let's sell it. So we sold it. We made a massive amount of profit on it. That allowed us to go and buy another 2 HMOs.
Right, okay.
So it worked out in the end.
It worked out.
But I mean, every lesson that could have been learned, we learned on that one.
Because if you, I'm assuming you went in it, was it your own cash or was it private investors' cash?
It was private investors' cash.
So if the deal kind of was you're out in 6 months or 8 months on a refinance, then you can't refinance.
Yeah.
Like, it's bad enough when it's your own money. It's worse when you've kind of, taken money on this set of circumstances. Yeah, we're going to refinance it for you.
There was a few sweat beads.
To then go, actually, we can't refinance it. So, so they were able just to sell it, thankfully,
we
on
sold
that case.
And luckily enough, the private investors were happy. We had a clause tied in with them that they were going to get so much extra for every month that we went over. So they were happy. They were getting extra money. And we were 3 months over. But it worked because the rent was more than covering their payments coming in anyway. So
thinking about funding, I'm really curious about that, because it's really interesting that clause was there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's not, and then that leads to the bad blood and the friction because both sides kind of had different expectations.
Yeah.
So was that you on your side as the borrower making sure the correct terms were in place to deal with an extension, or did the person with the money say to you, Laura, I want this in? I'm curious how that came about.
I don't know, to be honest with you. I think it might have been a wee bit of a mixture of both.
Yeah, okay.
I think, it might have been a conversation, if I remember, saying, what happens if you don't pay?
What happens if, yeah.
So we were like, look, if we don't pay, we're happy to pay you extra until we do pay.
Yeah.
So
okay, no, that's interesting.
But it turned out well in the end. But we did learn a lot of lessons.
Yeah. No, and that's what it's about. The learning is. I mean, it's funny that something as perhaps fundamental as a cafe next door means it can't be refinanced.
Yeah.
And you're a property professional, have been for many years, and yet sometimes, like we all sometimes just overlook something or assume something.
Yeah.
That turns out not to be the case.
I'd seen property purchases go through before, with mortgages next door to cafes, time and time again.
Was that a policy change, do you think, within the lender, or just perhaps before it wasn't just close enough?
The BM, as a consultant for Northern Ireland, actually couldn't understand why the surveyor had said no.
Right.
But there was no changing. Once it was said no, that was it.
Just got them on a bad day.
Got him on a bad day.
Highly possible. Okay. So, sort of heading towards the end here, you've actually sort of almost covered a little bit, sort of lessons learned. Any other, what I call, don't do this sort of lessons that either you learnt or you saw in property or heard about in property, anything? So if someone's thinking, right, I want to get into HMOs, I want to go out and access private investors, for my funding lines, any big red, don't do this? Anything come to mind?
I think you just really need to make sure that you do your due diligence, especially in Northern Ireland, because you can't always be guaranteed the outcome. So more of a do than a don't. Make sure you've got multiple exit strategies. Don't go and just buy something without thinking about it, because
end up in
make
problems.
sure you get a home buyer's report. Don't ever buy a property without a home buyer's report.
Okay, that's a good one.
I think is a good one, because I have seen clients and where they haven't, and they've went through and they're like, no, the mortgage report's good enough. I'll be happy with the mortgage report. And he went in and he started taking down a few ceilings, and he ended up having to replace every timber on the inside of a house.
Wow.
Because it was riddled with woodworm.
Woodworm.
So all the joists, all the stud walls, everything had to go in the entire house.
Wow.
So
and that obviously wasn't picked up in the
wasn't picked up in the mortgage survey.
Right. No, that's a fair one. Have you ever done much in auctions in the province here? No.
So, well, that initial HMO that we bought was purchased through an auction.
Okay. Okay.
My husband and I's first property that we bought together, it was through an auction.
Okay.
Back in 2009.
Just after,
a lovely wee apartment in Lurgan.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
But it worked out really well.
Yeah.
We bought it for 41,000, and we were getting £500 a month rent on it. So
it's a decent yield.
it is a decent yield.
That's a good yield.
I had to sell it though when I started my own business. So
Aye. Okay.
the equity on it kept me afloat for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where we first got involved, myself and Brenda, way back in 2000. Was at the lower end of the market.
Yeah.
I mean, the first property we purchased with a couple of fellas, set up a limited company. One guy put in the money. £38,000 was our first ever purchase. Yeah. And we then went on and we bought 26 properties in 18 months. In like 2000 to 2002. And then the guy with the money panicked and thought the market had reached its peak in 2002.
Wow.
Right, so
that was the good old days where you could buy and sell on the same day and make lots of money.
And that was our model.
Yeah.
We bought with his cash and then did it up. Very often it was just very light, decor, sometimes refurb, and then literally we just refinance it.
Yeah.
And that all could be done in the space of about 8 weeks, 9 weeks.
Yeah, whereas you
like,
can't do that now.
Mad. Now this whole 6-month rule changed, property, investment for, well, probably forever in that sense.
Yeah.
I don't see it come back anytime soon in terms of being changed back, but in those days it was incredible. You could just literally, we were back in the first auctions we bought were back in about 2000, and again back to what we talked about earlier about Northern Ireland and the perception. A lot of the investors in England looked at Northern Ireland probably as a bit like Beirut, and just didn't even think of it as an option. And we were sitting on the phones, literally bidding at auctions in England for property in Northern Ireland. Because what people didn't understand was that the Halifax, which was probably one of the biggest lenders back then, every single repossession they had in Northern Ireland went on property auction in England.
Right, okay.
So there was this incredible niche that very few people at that stage knew about.
Yeah.
So you had all these repossessions for variety of reasons, and people just didn't realise you can actually go direct to lenders and buy property cheap. As long as they were getting their mortgage back, they didn't care what else they were selling. In fact, some cases they couldn't sell it for much more than what they were owed, and therefore we were literally just sitting over here in Northern Ireland on the phone, buying up properties at 35, 40, 45 that were worth tangibly 65 and 70 all day long.
I think the whole auction thing's kind of changed a bit now, especially over here.
Massively.
Through Cairns Downing we work with an auction house. Sold.
Yes.
So. But it's totally different, most of the time it doesn't even get to auction, it's sold before auction. Yeah.
And then what I got very frustrated probably in 05, 06, that the auction became the rage. There's a couple of TV programs about auctions, and you went to an auction, it was packed out with people, and then you soon got to know, I will not mention any names obviously because we're in Northern Ireland on a podcast, but there weren't that many auction houses. But you got to know the characteristics of the guy doing the auction of when he was just taking bids off the wall, and it used to be frightening. You knew, experienced people would go into the back of the room if you can, so you can watch the room and see what's going on. And it became so obvious at times that they were just bidding stuff up. There's nobody really. You're at the very back of the room, and the guy would go, "Yeah, at the back of the room," and you're going, well, I'm the back of the room and nobody in front of me has moved a muscle, and he's bouncing back and forward to someone, at the front of the room, and it's just like, nah.
There's very little sales, I believe, now in room auctions.
Oh yeah, I think, and that I think is part of it, that people have started to distrust the in the room auction process.
Yeah.
I know we've probably diversified a bit, and we'll probably both get some LinkedIn messages from local auction people in Northern Ireland, but that was certainly my experience and our experience for a while. It was like, you know what, you were nearly afraid to buy at an auction because, so if it's still on, why hasn't it sold pre-auction? Yeah. That was obviously a concern. And then 2, in the room, the chances are they're just, bidding it up. Yeah. And so, but anyway, that was my experience. Future, what does Laura want to achieve? Year, 2 years, 3 years, fast forward, Where do you see yourself in terms of your
Where do I see myself?
property business?
I think maybe Cairns Downing is probably taking the forefront. We will hopefully get the Dromore branch up and running. Hopefully at a point where it can start running itself, and then we can maybe open another branch. NI property, I honestly don't know. I think if Cairns Downing gets so busy, I might tail it off, but I might just keep on with normal clients and even just start building my own portfolio a wee bit more.
Yeah. Okay. And you obviously have a strategy for your own family portfolio. You're building that in the background, and in terms of how you structure that, do you tend to try and get lending yourself for that and scale by leverage, or do you prefer to try and like buy cash, get rid of the debt as fast as possible, and own the assets unencumbered? Have you a clear strategy either way on that?
Do you know what? I don't really believe in owning them unencumbered.
Okay.
I think, well, whenever interest rates were so low and it was free money, it was great. You know, why would you have an unencumbered property? Now that that wee bit higher, it is good to have it down a wee bit. But I think if the interest rates come back down again, hopefully to around 3.5%. I don't, you know, as long as you're in a good enough loan to value, and keep the portfolio going.
Yeah.
The idea is that in 15, 20 years time, one or two of those will hopefully pay off.
Pay off everything.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Slightly controversial, but good. I think most people would go that route.
Yeah.
You know, leveraging. I'll tell this story just very, very quickly. Way back when we started to buy the properties in Glasgow. Again, I'll not mention her name, but a friend who at the same time was buying property. So I think we went over a couple of times and looked at property. But she got to about 8 or 9 properties, but she just capital repayment. Right, this is back like 2004 or 5.
Okay.
And I'm like, no, leverage every penny you can get off the bank and go again, and keep your equity and keep your cash. And I can remember a couple of years after the credit crunch when I was interest rates come down very low at that point, but leading up to that, it was a struggle for her to make the capital repayments, a real struggle. And I used to go, told you, you know, we're making so much a month off our portfolio, interest rates are low. And then bit by bit, and now she has all what she owns completely paid for, unencumbered. And when interest rates went up, we're sitting with our portfolio.
Yeah.
Let me literally to within about 5 or 6 months where the rent wasn't covering the interest. And then she's
Nice
like,
times.
I did tell you, David, I did tell you. If only I'd listened. But I suppose it's the balance. Maybe get a couple paid off and then maybe have your leverage strategy on top of that.
Well, I mean, if you're sitting at 50 to 60% loan to value,
yes,
rather than maxing it out to 75,
that makes sense.
then I think that's where the happy medium maybe is on the current interest rates anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think that's good input. So finish off then in terms of any tips you would give. I try and stay away from the word advice because we both know that's the wrong word to use and when it comes to finance sometimes. But in terms of say someone outside Northern Ireland looking at Northern Ireland as a potential place to invest in property, what would you say to them?
Northern Ireland's a fantastic place to invest in property. The rental market is just in so much demand at the minute. So if you're buying to rent out, it is just, we can't keep up with the rental demand. Rents are going through the roof, which isn't great to a sense, but with the current mortgage interest payments anyway, you know, they are more than covering. House prices are still relatively low here. We haven't met the 2006, although we are getting there. So it's definitely a good place to invest.
Yeah. So you'd agree there's good property fundamentals to invest in Northern Ireland?
There is, definitely.
Excellent. Okay, and then what about if someone comes to you, even say one of your children, I'm thinking get involved in property, Mum. Is it a good career? Is it a good business? What would your response be?
Well, my 9-year-old is adamant she's taking over my business one day. So
get it in writing. Get the agreements done early.
We'll see whenever she gets to 18, 19 how that goes. Whereas my older one, she actually works now as a first responder, so she's she's no interest in property whatsoever. Okay. But I think she did mention about maybe buying her first house. I just think absolutely recommend to get started as soon as you can. I keep telling her, stop going out and spending all your money. Make sure you're putting it away. You need a deposit for your first house.
And why do kids never listen? Well, no, I shouldn't say never listen. It maybe you have to tell them a lot of times.
Did you listen?
Before? Of course not. And that's exactly it.
Neither did I.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny you say that, because obviously you know my oldest son Josh.
Yeah.
You've met him, and I mean, he's now 25. Spent a bit of time working in the world of property, looking to get a buy-to-let, his own buy-to-let. But like, even when he was 20, 21, 22, he was on these investment apps, and he was stocks and shares, and I would say to him, and in fact, I obviously had a crowdfunding platform. I mean, he invested in about 10 or 11 different projects on the crowdfunding platform.
Very good.
Now it started off a couple of hundred and a couple of thousand.
Yeah.
But building his own wee portfolio. And I used to say to him, I said, Josh, when I was 23, 24, not a mission did I even think about investments. Wasn't thinking about property. Wasn't thinking about stocks and shares. I mean, it wasn't even in my radar.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I thought about it and didn't do it. I can't even remember even having those thoughts. I think the younger generation, and see if you agree with me or not on this, I think they're a lot more savvy to things like investments and property and stocks and shares. Have you found that in your experience?
Yeah, funny you should say that, because Kate has actually been dabbling in a bit in the stocks and shares, and she's
Right.
21.
There you
So,
are.
yeah, she's come to me a few times and said, what do you think of this, or what do you think of that? And I'm like, I don't really know very much about the whole stocks and shares, but get your deposit saved and buy your first investment.
That makes sense. Well, I think that's a really good place to finish. We can maybe come back in 20, 30 years' time and be in the rocking chairs and see how our kids are doing with our empires, But listen, Laura, pleasure. I really appreciate you coming in, and I hope you enjoyed that, having a chinwag. And I think we've let people see a bit more about the Northern Ireland market, which is what we're trying to achieve, and I wish you every success in your property businesses.
Thank you so much.